This is where high-end art meets the raw reality of the human experience. With stunning visuals and narratives that will blow your mind, we invite you to enter a world of pure imagination. Enter our world today by hitting that subscribe button.
The night I finally understood what my sister-in-law really thought of me. She was wearing a red dress and holding a glass of champagne she hadn't paid for. It was my company's 10-year anniversary gala. My company's. The one I'd built from a spare bedroom and a maxed-out credit card while my ex-husband told me I was wasting my time. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Her name is Gemma, my ex-husband's younger sister. When Trevor and I got married 8 years ago, Gemma and I became close the way women sometimes do when they're thrown together by circumstance and discover they actually like each other. Or at least, I thought we did. She was funny, sharp, the kind of person who said exactly what was on her mind and made you feel like you'd earned something when she turned that honesty on you like a compliment. I trusted her completely. I told her things I didn't tell anyone else. My fears about the business struggling, the quiet loneliness of a marriage that had started to feel like a waiting room. What I didn't know was that she was telling Trevor everything, not to protect me, to help him. Let me back up to where it actually started, because the gala was the end of the story, not the beginning. The beginning was a Tuesday in March 3 years ago, in the kitchen of the house Trevor and I owned together. I came home early from a client meeting that had been cancelled. I remember being almost happy about it. A free afternoon felt like a gift back then, rare enough to notice. I had this small idea that I'd start dinner before Trevor got home, something nice because we'd been so distant with each other, and I kept thinking if I just tried a little harder, showed up a little more, things would turn around. I opened the front door and heard voices in the kitchen. I wasn't afraid at first. I thought maybe it was Trevor's coworker or his college friend who sometimes dropped by without warning. I set my bag down in the hallway and walked toward the sound. Gemma was sitting on the counter. Trevor was standing close to her, too close, and they were laughing about something. The kind of laugh that has history in it. I stood in the doorway and neither of them heard me. And then Trevor reached out and tucked a piece of hair behind Gemma's ear. I had never seen him do that to me. Not once since 6 years of marriage. I don't remember exactly what I said. Something ordinary, I think. Some version of I'm home early that came out completely flat. They both turned at the same moment with that particular expression people wear when they've been caught doing something they can't explain away. Not quite guilt, because guilt requires a little more self-awareness than either of them had in that moment. More like surprise that the moment was suddenly over. Gemma slid off the counter. She said my name. That was it. Just my name. Trevor started explaining something about how she'd stopped by, how they'd just been talking, how I was misreading the situation. He was calm about it, which was somehow the worst part. Not nervous, not scrambling, calm. Like he thought through this possibility before and had a plan. I asked her to leave. She left. That night, Trevor and I sat on opposite ends of the couch, and he told me it had been going on for 4 months. He said he hadn't planned it. He said he was sorry, but he said it the way people say the traffic was terrible, as a statement of fact, not an apology. He said he and Gemma cared about each other, and he didn't know what he wanted, but he needed time to figure it out. I asked him to leave instead. He did, and I sat alone in that house for 2 weeks before I called a lawyer. There was no dramatic confrontation, no screaming, no throwing things, no moment where I said all the perfect sharp things I would think of later in the shower. I was too tired and too sad, and maybe a little too humiliated. Gemma had been in my home, she had eaten at my table. She had held my hand at my mother's funeral and cried real tears, or tears that looked real, and I had never once questioned it. That particular kind of betrayal takes a while to process. The anger comes later, after the shock has worn off enough to make room for it. I filed for divorce. Trevor and Gemma moved in together 6 months later, which I heard from his cousin in the way you always hear these things. Sideways, from someone who isn't sure if they're helping or just curious. I didn't respond. I had already started making myself not care, and it was working, slowly, in the way that most deliberate things work. What I did instead was work. I had started my events consulting firm 2 years before the divorce, mostly as a side project, while Trevor kept telling me I should focus on being more present at home. After he left, I had no reason not to pour everything into it. I worked 18-hour days. I took clients I would have been nervous about before. I hired my first employee, then 3 more, then 7. I moved out of the spare bedroom and into an actual office. I stopped thinking about Trevor in the middle of conference calls. I stopped thinking about Gemma in the mirror every morning. I rebuilt. By the time the third anniversary of the company came around, we had grown into something I was genuinely proud of. We'd planned the mayor's inaugural gala. We'd handled 3 high-profile nonprofit fundraisers. We had a reputation in this city, and I had built it myself, without anyone's help, without anyone's hand on my shoulder telling me I was doing well. The 10-year anniversary gala was my idea. A celebration for clients, vendors, staff, everyone who had been part of the company's story. We booked the rooftop ballroom at the Whitmore Hotel. I chose everything myself, down to the flowers. I was standing near the bar talking to my CFO when I saw Gemma. She walked in with Trevor, which I had known was a possibility. One of my vendors had a professional relationship with him and had mentioned too casually that he might attend with his wife. They had gotten married last year, I knew. A small ceremony, according to the same cousin, who had apparently appointed himself my source of information I didn't ask for. She looked good. That's the honest thing to say. She looked polished and confident, the way people look when they believe they've won something. I turned back to my CFO and kept talking. I was good at this by now. I thought I might get through the entire evening without a real conversation with her. I moved through the room, spoke to clients, laughed at the right moments, thanked the right people. I was good at this too. But then, maybe an hour in, she found me near the windows. "This is stunning," she said. As if we were acquaintances. As if she had just met me and was making conversation. "Thank you," I said. I was proud of that. 2 words, pleasant, nothing she could use. She looked out at the view for a moment and then looked back at me with that expression people wear when they've been rehearsing something. "I've heard a lot about what you've built here," she said. "It's impressive, honestly. Trevor and I always talk about how hard you work." I looked at her. She had the grace, or maybe just the nerve, to hold my gaze. "How nice," I said. And then she said it, the thing that would stay with me, that I would think about later that night and the next morning and several times after that. She smiled, not unkindly, which was somehow worse than unkind, and said, "I hope you find someone you know. It must be lonely putting everything into a business. Some of us just want different things." There it was. The smile said, "I have the marriage, I have the husband. I won, and you threw yourself into work because there was nothing else." I felt something move through me, something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite sadness, more like clarity. The kind you get when something you half knew for a long time suddenly has a shape and a name. I didn't say anything right away. I was thinking for just a moment about the version of myself who would have gone quiet, who would have made an excuse and walked away. I had been that version for a long time. I looked at her and I said, "Actually, I'm not lonely at all." She raised an eyebrow, not understanding. "I got married 6 months ago," I said. Quietly, "We wanted something small." The smile shifted. "Oh," she said, "I didn't." "No," I agreed pleasantly. "Most people didn't." I looked across the room then, and my husband saw me looking, and he started to walk over. He does that, notices when I need him and moves toward me without being asked. It's one of the things I love about him. I watched Gemma's face as he crossed the room. His name is Dr. Tim. Nathaniel Okafor. He is one of the most respected oncologists in the state. He has a quiet confidence that fills a room without announcing itself, and when he smiles at me in public, it still makes something in my chest feel like it did when I was 22 and thought love was a simple thing. He had also, as it happened, been a keynote speaker at a medical fundraiser that Gemma had worked on, one of the few corporate events she'd handled in her brief time as a junior event coordinator, years ago, before she met Trevor. He had been, from what I understood later, politely dismissive of her when she'd tried to extend the professional relationship past its natural end. She had apparently not forgotten. I didn't know any of this when we met. I only found out after, when he mentioned it with the mild surprise of someone realizing 2 separate threads of their life were connected. But I knew, watching her face, that she recognized him, and I could see exactly what it cost her to process what she was seeing. He reached me and put his hand on the small of my back, and I leaned into it slightly, which is not something I'd perform for an audience. It's just what I do. "I was just telling her about us," I said to him easily. He looked at Gemma with polite recognition. "Right," he said. He was always gracious, even when I could tell he remembered exactly who someone was. "Good to see you." Gemma said something. I don't even remember what. Something reflexive. Some automatic response that came out thinner than she intended. Trevor appeared at her side a moment later, and for a brief, strange second, I was looking at both of them together. The two people who had done the thing I'd spent 3 years quietly surviving. Trevor looked the same. A little older. He glanced at my husband and then at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, and I realized I didn't actually care what it meant. That was the moment. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just, I didn't care. Enjoy the evening, I said. And I meant it completely without venom, which surprised even me. And then I turned and walked with my husband toward a group of clients who had been waiting to congratulate me, and I didn't look back. Later, when the gala was winding down and the last guests were filtering out and my team was moving through the room doing the quiet cleanup work that follows every event, Nathaniel and I stood on the terrace for a few minutes. The city spread out below us, all those lights that look permanent even though you know everything changes. He handed me a glass of water and looked at me in the way he does when he's reading a situation carefully. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said, and then I thought about it for a real second, actually checked, and said, "Yeah. Actually." He nodded. I thought about what Gemma had said, some of us just want different things. And how she had meant it as a small, private knife, something to let some air out of the evening for me. What she didn't know, couldn't know, because she'd spent 3 years imagining a version of my life that made her comfortable, was that I had spent those same 3 years building something I was proud of, not as a substitute for connection or love or whatever she imagined I was compensating for, but because I am someone who builds things. It's just who I am. I found Nathaniel at a mutual friend's dinner 2 years ago. We talked until everyone else had gone home. He had the kind of mind that makes you feel more like yourself, not less, which I had stopped expecting from anyone. We got married on a Tuesday, just the two of us and a judge and 2 witnesses, and then went to dinner at a small Italian place where the owner knew his name and brought us wine without being asked. It was one of the best days of my life, and I had not posted about it, had not announced it, had not performed it for anyone, which meant that when I told Gemma that evening, it had the particular quality of something real, something that had existed entirely independently of her awareness of it. That's actually the best revenge, if you want to call it that. Not the kind where you engineer someone's downfall or wait for karma or craft a perfect speech. Just a life that became genuinely good while no one was watching. I did not feel triumphant, exactly. Walking away from them, I felt clean, like something that had been slightly snagged on a nail had finally come loose. What I've thought about since, what I keep coming back to, is that Gemma probably still believes the story she told herself back then, that what she did was inevitable, that feelings can't be reasoned with, that Trevor and I would have ended anyway. Maybe that's true. I don't actually know what our marriage would have become without the interference. What I know is that the interference happened, and I'm standing in the life that came after it. And it is a good life. It is mine. Some people wait for the person who hurt them to be punished before they feel free. I understand that impulse completely. I had it for a long time, that tight waiting feeling, checking peripherally to see whether consequences were coming for the two of them. But consequences are slow and unreliable, and your own life doesn't pause while you're waiting for someone else's to go wrong. At some point in the 2nd year after the divorce, I stopped checking. I stopped tracking. I built my company. I took care of my people. I let myself fall in love with someone who was better suited to who I actually was. Not better than Trevor in some abstract ranking, just right. The way certain things fit when you stop forcing the wrong shape into the space. My team packed up the last of the event supplies around midnight. I signed off on the catering receipts and said goodnight to everyone, and Nathaniel and I walked to the car through the side exit where the night air was cooler than the ballroom had been. "I think tonight was a success," he said. "I think it was," I agreed. He opened my door. Old-fashioned, a little, something I had teased him about early on, and now just accepted as part of the way he moves through the world. I got in and looked up at the Whitmore's lit windows, thinking about the room up there that had my name on it tonight. Not literally, but in the way that a thing you've built always carries some trace of you. 3 years ago, I sat in my car in the driveway of that house on a Tuesday in March and cried for about 40 minutes before going inside. Not about Trevor, not really. About Gemma, mostly. About the friendship I thought I had, the one that had apparently never been what I believed it was. Tonight I sat in a different car outside a different building, and I felt none of that old weight. The city lights came on the way they always do, indifferent and reliable. I fastened my seatbelt and we drove home. I've thought a lot about what it actually takes to survive being betrayed by someone you loved and trusted. Not just a stranger, not just a coworker with bad intentions, but someone who sat at your table, who knew your fears, who used your own honesty against you. That specific kind of wound doesn't heal the way other ones do. It asks more of you. What I've come to understand is that there are really only two things you can do when something like that happens. You can spend your energy trying to make the other person feel the weight of what they did, or you can spend it building something. Those two things are mostly incompatible. You don't get to do both at full capacity. I chose to build, not because I'm a saint, and not because I wasn't angry. I was angry for longer than I'd like to admit. But because I eventually understood that my life was the only thing I actually had control over. Gemma's choices, Trevor's choices, the way that story ended between them, none of that was mine to manage. What was mine was the company, the work, the quiet, unglamorous daily decision to show up and do the next thing even when I didn't feel like it. Most of rebuilding looks nothing like the movies. It looks like answering emails at midnight and eating dinner alone and going to bed tired and doing it again. It's not dramatic, it's just repetition. Until one day the repetition has produced something real. I think about Gemma sometimes, not with bitterness anymore, but with a kind of clear-eyed understanding. She made choices that said something about who she was, not who I was. That distinction took me a long time to really absorb. When someone betrays you, there's a pull to believe it means something about your worth. That you weren't enough, weren't interesting enough, weren't paying enough attention. That pull is a lie, and it's one of the most damaging lies you can believe about yourself. Her actions were a reflection of her character. Full stop. And Trevor? I don't think he was a villain in the way stories usually need. I think he was someone who never examined himself closely enough to know what he actually wanted until he'd already hurt several people finding out. That's not an excuse, but understanding it helped me stop carrying something that was never really mine to carry. The night of the gala, when I walked away from them and felt that clean, settled feeling, that wasn't luck. That was the result of 3 years of choosing myself over and over, in small, unremarkable ways, until the choice became automatic. Nathaniel didn't rescue me from anything. He found me after I'd already done the work. That's the version of the story I want people to hear, because I think we get confused about the order of things. The good life came because I built it. The right person came because I had become someone I actually respected. If you're in the middle of something like this right now, the shock's still fresh, the anger still loud, I just want to say, the other side is real. It exists. But you have to walk toward it yourself. One ordinary day at a time, and the walking is the point.